Here's a quote from Ray Comfort, which was tweeted back in December of 2023 by Frank Turek. He says, "Atheists don't hate fairies, leprechauns, or unicorns because they don't exist. It's impossible to hate something that doesn't exist. Atheists, like the painting experts hated the painter, hate God because he does exist." Now, the first thing I'll point out here is that this is false, clearly, in the sense that one can certainly experience hatred towards something that one wrongly believe exists. For example, let's say Smith's wife dies and he believes she was in fact murdered. He may hate the murderer that he believes killed her, even though she in fact died of natural causes. So all the while, he's experiencing hatred towards that murderer, but there in fact is no murderer. And that it would be absurd to say that he never experienced hatred just because there was no murderer in fact and she died of natural causes. So you can easily experience hate towards something that does not exist. Um, but here's the bigger question for us. Why does Frank Turek and Ray Comfort, obviously he's retweeting Comfort here with approval, why does he claim that atheists hate God in the first place? Well, this is going to come back, I believe, to their interpretation of Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So the logic goes like this for these fundamentalist apologists. They say God's nature and power are clearly manifest to everyone. So everyone really does believe in God because God's present to them. So that if you are not acknowledging that God exists, it is not because God is not clearly present to you, it is because you hate God. You are refusing to submit to God. And thus, the atheist is somebody who hates God and refuses to submit to God. Now, first of all, that's just a terrible interpretation of Romans 1:20. The general point Paul is making here is he's appealing to general revelation, yes, and that there's a general revelation that people can have of God through which they can know God. But the bigger point of Romans 1:20 and indeed of Romans chapters 1 to chapter 3 is that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We all refuse to follow God. And to that degree, we're all culpable. To single out one group, such as atheists, is completely to miss the point here. But here's the bigger issue, perhaps. If you claim that every time a person refuses to acknowledge that God exists, they are actively hating God and refusing to acknowledge that knowledge of Him that they in fact do have, that is not only a condemnation of atheists, but of Christians as well. Because how many Christians do you know who have ever had doubts, questions, uncertainty, anything less than rock solid certainty that God exists and that God has a particular loving, powerful nature? How many Christians have ever doubted anything about the existence or nature of God? Well, probably most, I would think. From that, it would follow every time any Christian ever has any doubt, they are hating God and refusing to acknowledge and submit to God. Now, you could say that, I suppose, but that is the ultimate sort of health and wealth theology of the mind. In other words, anytime you have a doubt, it is a sin. Just like the health and wealth gospel says, anytime you are sick, it is a sin, it is your fault. So, on this theology, anytime you ever have a doubt, it is your fault and you are sinning. And that is just absolutely perverse, so far as I can see. Imagine, for example, a father who just lost his 5-year-old daughter to cancer. And in that moment, that she dies and he finally loses her in her battle to cancer. He finds a deep darkness welling up in his soul and he doubts the very existence of God. Do you really want to claim that because that father in that moment doubted the existence of God, that he is sinfully refusing to acknowledge God and in fact hating God? You could say that, I suppose. I would think that's not only false, but it's pastorally disastrous. And in the same way that it would be absolutely wrong to condemn as rebellion and sin and hatred of God every doubt that one finds in the Christian life, so you cannot dismiss every doubt of an atheist in their lives and call that sinful hatred of God. with that in mind, let's return anyway to that tweet that Turek posted from Ray Comfort. The interesting thing is he posts this tweet on a fairly regular basis. Here it is again from 2025, here it is from 2024, and here it is again from just a few days ago, October 10th, 2025. And in fact, I know that he regularly posts this, and when he posted it again a few days ago, I thought, you know what? This is worth pointing out. Why would you repeatedly tweet something that is false and spurious about atheists, which presents them as hating God? I mean, imagine for a moment, let's just pause for a moment. Christians believe that God is the source of all life, love, and goodness, and they claim that atheists hate that God. What you are saying then is atheists are a group collectively who hate the greatest, most wonderful, loving being that there could ever be. What that is simply is a way to malign and dehumanize and objectify a segment of the population. That is the unbelieving and atheistic segment of the population. And what a tragedy that is when you claim to be a Christian apologist who wants to win over atheists, and yet you dehumanize them and objectify them by spreading these false and malicious lies about them. It is a truly tragic situation for someone who claims to be a Christian apologist.